Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. BAM Weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a quick long-range forecast update, guys. Really going to just focus on this video in terms of the pattern transition that we are expecting to happen towards the midway part of the month. We've been talking about it now for a week and a half, 2 weeks, that the first couple of weeks of February would be very mild, very warm. No change to that idea at all. Just want to focus on the transition and how cold it could get towards the end of the month. Let's start out here with the next 7 days, the first week of February, and substantially above normal temperatures across the central U.S., northern plains, and all the way up into the Canadian prairies, guys. Any time that you are getting a 7-day stretch averaging out 10 to 15 degrees above normal, let alone 20 to 25 degrees above normal, that is substantial. It is certainly notable. It's nothing to bat an eye at. Some cooler air behind a storm system in the far southeastern portion of the country, and then all of that moisture in California in the short term, allowing for cooler than normal temperatures there as well. But aside from that, well below normal demand, and certainly a very notably warm forecast across much of the central part of the country and up into Canada, and really, guys, into the week 2 time frame. No changes here either. It's going to remain very mild, remain very warm. Demand is going to remain very low for this time of the year. Much above normal temperatures continuing across the central U.S., the Great Lakes, the Midwest, even into the interior northeastern portion of the country here, guys. I think at the very end of the run, end of the week 2 time frame, we can start to moderate things across the southeast U.S. a little bit here. But really, the theme through the end of the second week of February is going to remain warmth. The change is going to start to happen, though, around the 15th. I think that there's a storm system around Valentine's Day or just shortly after that is going to set off a bigger change in the pattern. And I think that there are still some things to sort out in terms of how big of a change it is. But I do think that the confidence is very high on seeing a big transition, and it kind of starts with the tropical forcing in the Pacific jet. We take a look here. We've been stalled out in warm phases of our tropical forcing, our MJO, phase 6 and 7. You get into phase 8, which it's looking increasingly likely that we will do that here as we work towards the back half of February. You get a change in the Pacific Northwest, more of what we call a positive PNA. And then look at the blocking. Look at the higher pressure that develops in this phase in the Arctic, in the North Atlantic. That is just naturally going to allow for colder risks to develop across the eastern half of the United States. And if we take a look here, guys, at all of the different clusters, all of the different EPS and GEFS members, there is a very, very strong consensus for a ridge of high pressure to develop across the western half of the United States, western North America in general, I would say, and a lot of them here developing a negative NAO and high pressure over Greenland. I would say the vast majority of them really have this signal. I would say this is about as locked in as you can get for a day 15 forecast. And so confidence is very high, I would say, that a transition is going to happen to a cooler pattern in the eastern portion of the country as we work towards the 15th of February and beyond. It's probably that 15th to the 18th time frame there where we transition. It'll take a couple of days to moderate the very mild pattern that we are in, but I do think that it happens. If we take a look here, guys, I also think that as this happens, you can get an increase in storm systems. Again, we talked about that Valentine's Day, February 15th-ish type of storm that's in there. I think between the 15th and the 20th of the month, it could be a rather favorable storm track for winter storms through the eastern portion of the country. A couple of our analog years, 1987, that's one we've thrown out a lot, had decent little snow systems across the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, in that time frame. I certainly think that that is something to watch. I think it's a little bit more active, and I think that there's an opportunity for winter storm potential in there between the 15th and the 20th. And then as we work towards the last 10 days of the month, that's likely when the change becomes a little bit more consistent and we kind of lock into the cooler than normal pattern. The big question is, how cold does it get? That is the question that we've been getting. That's the question that we want to figure out. One thing that I think we need to watch very, very carefully towards the back half of February is the polar vortex. Some of the ensemble data, some of the operational data, weakening the vortex once again. Now, not necessarily down into sudden stratospheric warming territory, at least not yet, but this big weakening will certainly favor more blocking and more availability for cold air to come further south. Now, if you were to get a situation, something like what the GFS were to suggest, towards the 15th, 16th of the month, it's actually trying to go on for a full-on warming event, a full-on split of the vortex. That would open up the door for more notable cold. Now, its ensemble counterpart here is not quite on board with that yet, but it is stretched. So again, when you stretch the vortex like this, there is more availability to pull in colder air for the eastern portion of the country. Now, I think the key to watch is, A, do we actually get a split? If we actually get a split, we'll have to trend more aggressive with our forecast for the back half of February. To make that very clear. If we end up with the core of the lobe on the other side of the planet, you're still going to get cold, but the most notable cold would go over there. We're talking 14, 15, 16 days out with these forecasts, guys, and so confidence in terms of how exactly the vortex is going to evolve is lower, but I think this is a critical piece to watch over the next couple of weeks. If I had to nail things down right now, here's how the mid to late February pattern progression would evolve. First 2 weeks of February, guys, really no change. They're going to be very warm, very mild, and frankly, in terms of how February ends up looking as a whole, it's probably going to be skewed highly by the first 2 weeks of February. Still probably going to look warmer than normal when all is said and done. Now, as we deal with that storm system around the 15th or so of the month, it will be kind of the trigger that starts to pull in some cooler air. We may initially remain a little bit warmer across the northern and central portion of the country, but I think slowly but surely between the 15th and the 18th, we start to allow some cooler air to seep in to the south and east U.S. Maybe not notable at first. It may take some time to get more below normal cold air to come in, but I do think that it happens. And then the last 10 days of the month, guys, that is going to be kind of the core of our cooler period. More widespread below normal temperatures, southern and eastern portion of the country. I think the highest potential for much below normal temperatures would be kind of the mid-Atlantic to the southeastern portion of the country in here. Now, not saying that it's to mid-January levels. Do not get me wrong there. I am not necessarily forecasting here 20, 30 degrees below normal like it was for a time with that vortex split in the middle part of January. But I do think that there is an increasing potential for maybe some time of much below normal temperatures across the southeast U.S., 5 to 10 degrees below normal or so in that portion of the country. The risk towards the more notable cold side of things would be if the polar vortex does split, that would bring more widespread notable cold, more widespread much below to extremely below normal temperatures, and probably linger it around longer. Right now, again, not necessarily on board with that, but I certainly do think the last 10 days of the month can feature above normal heating demand and a more widespread cooler and wintry pattern for the southern and eastern portion of the country, guys. So something to keep an eye on, no doubt about it. And I also think that maybe that could linger into the first couple of days of March as well. Maybe in the first 7 to 10 days of March. So certainly something to watch in there. Real quick before we go, I did want to show you all this. This was our note slide from September 14th, if you can believe it. So several months ago, talking about how February held the potential for this type of a look. Obviously, the start of the month going to allow things to average out warmer than normal, but the idea of some of this blocking, some of this higher pressure over Canada and over Greenland in the month of February has been an idea that we've had around since the middle part of September. So just goes to show that with good research, you can certainly get an idea of these types of patterns, not only weeks in advance, but months in advance as well. Guys, that's all I have for today. Hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday.